Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a very, very slow stroll through the ancient world, back to a time when your smartphone didn't tell you it was 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Imagine yourself under the scorching Persian sun, feeling the warmth on your skin, perhaps a gentle breeze rustling through date palm fronds. You're trying to figure out if it's time for your midday snack of figs and goat cheese, but there's no Big Ben chiming, no digital display blinking a number at you. Instead, you're looking at a carefully carved stone and a shadow creeping ever so slowly across its surface. This shadow, you see, is your clock, your calendar, your entire scheduling system. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this era without your digital crutches, would you? Oh, and don't even get me started on trying to set up a meeting. Meet me when the shadow reaches the third line on a large obelisk near the bazaar entrance. Unless it's cloudy, then just wing it, I suppose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story tonight begins with the simplest, most intuitive method of tracking time, the sun. And in ancient Persia, where the sun was a constant, glorious presence, it became the first and most fundamental timekeeper. You see, the shadow cast by an object changes its length and position throughout the day. It's a bit like watching your own personal, slow-motion ballet on the ground. Early Persian sundials, or gnomons as they were more broadly known across the ancient world, were essentially just a stick or a pillar placed upright in the ground. Simple, elegant, and surprisingly effective for their purpose. You'd probably think, well, that's not exactly rocket science, is it? And you'd be right, in a way. But the genius wasn't just in the stick. It was in the observation, the patient, meticulous tracking of that shadow's dance across the marked surface. Imagine the early astronomers, or perhaps just particularly observant farmers, noticing the consistent patterns day after day, season after season. They saw the shadow shorten as the sun climbed higher, reaching its most diminutive length at midday, then stretching out again as evening approached. It's a very satisfying, very natural rhythm, isn't it? These early sundials weren't just decorative garden features, mind you. They were deeply integrated into daily life. For the agricultural communities, knowing the approximate time allowed them to manage their irrigation schedules, their planting times, and their harvest periods. You wouldn't want to miss that crucial window for watering your crops just because you overslept, would you? And for those working in the cities, perhaps in the bustling bazaars of Persepolis or Susa, the sundial provided a framework for their day. When did the market open? When were the best prices available? When was it time for a quiet moment of prayer? All guided by the silent, slow progress of a shadow. It really puts our modern obsession with minutes and seconds into perspective. They weren't counting individual ticks. They were living by the broader strokes of the day, a much more relaxed pace, you might imagine. Historians still debate the exact earliest forms of these sundials in Persia, but evidence suggests their use dates back millennia, evolving from simple shadow-casting sticks to more sophisticated, carved stone instruments. One particularly quirky tidbit is the idea of human sundials. Not a person standing still all day, mind you, but rather using one's own shadow to estimate the time, perhaps by counting foot lengths from your heels to the tip of your shadow. So if you were tall, your time might be different from your shorter neighbors. A truly bespoke timekeeping system, if ever there was one. It probably led to some delightful disagreements over who was late for the camel race. Imagine trying to explain to your boss, "My shadow said it was still early," while the sun, in its majestic daily procession, offered a splendid way to mark the hours. What happened when it decided to play hide and seek behind a cloud? Or, more fundamentally, what happened when night fell? You couldn't exactly rely on a sundial during your midnight snack craving. This, my sleepy friends, is where the ingenious Persians, and indeed many ancient civilizations, turned their attention to another essential element: water. Enter the clepsydra, or the water clock. It's a word that sounds rather grand, doesn't it? Clepsydra. Say it slowly with me. Clepsydra. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And it describes a device that, at its heart, is beautifully simple. A container with a small hole in the bottom, allowing water to drip out at a steady, measured rate. Imagine a large, ornate ceramic pot, perhaps decorated with intricate patterns or even tiny carved animals. At the very bottom, there's a precisely drilled aperture. As water slowly trickles from this hole, the level of the water inside the pot gradually drops. Markings on the interior of the vessel, or perhaps on a floating indicator, would then show the passage of time. It's the ultimate slow drip coffee maker, but for time itself. The slower the drip, the longer the measurement. The more precise the hole, the more accurate the time. This wasn't some haphazard splash and dash operation. The design of these water clocks required considerable skill and knowledge of hydraulics, even if it was just rudimentary. The consistency of the water flow was paramount, and factors like water pressure and temperature could subtly affect the accuracy. You can imagine the exasperated timekeeper on a cold morning, muttering about sluggish water flow and how it was throwing off his entire day. This water clock is running slow. I blame the chilly morning dew. The beauty of the water clock, of course, was its independence from the sun. It worked equally well on a cloudy day, deep within a temple, or through the darkest hours of the night. This made it indispensable for activities that didn't stop when the sun went down. Think about night watches, religious ceremonies that extended into the early hours, or simply knowing when it was acceptable to wake up your neighbor with a serenading lute solo. Early versions were probably very basic, but over centuries, they evolved into remarkably sophisticated mechanisms. Some even included gears, floating figures that would rise and fall with the water level, or even chimes to mark the hours. It's a delightful thought, isn't it? A little mechanical bird chirping every time another hour of water had drained away. Much more charming than the relentless beep of a modern alarm clock. Wouldn't you agree? One fascinating aspect of water clocks is their equal hour versus unequal hour distinction. Some ancient systems divided the daylight and nighttime into a fixed number of hours, meaning the length of an hour would change with the seasons. A summer daylight hour would be longer than a winter daylight hour. Other, more advanced water clocks, especially those used for specific purposes like legal proceedings, aimed for equal hours that were consistent regardless of the season. This in itself was a significant challenge and involved clever engineering to regulate the water flow. Historians still argue whether the transition from unequal to equal hours was driven purely by practical needs or by a growing philosophical understanding of time as a universal constant. It's a scholarly debate that could lull you to sleep just thinking about it. And a quirky tidbit for you. Some water clocks were actually used to time speeches in ancient courts. If you were a lawyer, you literally had a ticking clock running out of water, urging you to get to the point. No endless filibustering there. It certainly adds a new layer of pressure to public speaking, doesn't it? Imagine a little trickle, 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 reminding you that your eloquent peroration was, quite literally, draining away. So, we've covered the humble sundial and the ingenious water clock. But for the ancient Persians, measuring time wasn't just about knowing when to eat lunch or attend a court case. It was deeply, intrinsically linked to something far grander, far more mysterious: the heavens themselves. You see, the movement of the sun, moon, and stars across the night sky wasn't just a pretty show. It was a cosmic clock, a divine calendar, and a powerful source of information for those who knew how to read it. This brings us to the fascinating connection between timekeeping and astrology in ancient Persia. Now, before you conjure images of crystal balls and daily horoscopes in your mind, let's gently reframe what astrology meant back then. It was less about predicting your love life and more about understanding the will of the gods, the fate of empires, and the auspicious times for crucial decisions. Imagine yourself on a clear Persian night, the stars a dazzling tapestry above you, so many more than you can ever see in our light-polluted modern world. The priests and learned scholars, often known as magi, would spend hours, perhaps entire nights, meticulously observing these celestial movements. They weren't just gazing. They were measuring, charting, and interpreting. The position of the sun at dawn, the phase of the moon, the rising and setting of particular constellations. All of these were vital markers in their sophisticated understanding of time. The very word hour itself, derived from ancient concepts, often carried astrological significance, with each hour of the day or night being associated with a specific planet or deity. It's a bit like our weekdays being named after Norse or Roman gods, but on a much more intricate, moment-by-moment basis. Imagine waking up and thinking, it's the hour of Jupiter today, a good time for big decisions. Or, the hour of Saturn, ... Maybe I'll just stay in bed. This celestial timekeeping wasn't just for theoretical contemplation. It had very practical applications for the elite. Kings and emperors would consult their astrologers to determine the most propitious moment for a battle, a marriage, or the construction of a new palace. Planting crops, embarking on journeys, even performing medical treatments, all could be influenced by the perceived cosmic energies of the moment. It was a holistic view of time, where every tick of the cosmic clock resonated with the fate of the individual and the empire. This meant that the accuracy of their sundials and water clocks, while important for daily scheduling, was also crucial for aligning earthly actions with heavenly dictates. You wouldn't want to launch a military campaign at an unlucky hour because your water clock was leaking, would you? That would be a truly unfortunate turn of events. One quirky tidbit about this blend of time and stars is the use of astrolabes. While perhaps not as ubiquitous as basic sundials, later Persian scholars developed and refined these intricate instruments. An astrolabe was essentially a portable model of the universe, allowing you to calculate the position of celestial bodies, determine the time of day or night, and even find your latitude. It was like having a supercomputer in your pocket, if your pocket was quite large and your computer was made of engraved brass plates. And historians still argue whether the primary motivation for astronomical observation was purely for timekeeping, for religious practice, or for a combination of both. It's truly difficult to untangle the threads of ancient thought. But for you, safely tucked in bed, perhaps it's enough to consider that every moment in ancient Persia, day or night, was imbued with a deeper celestial meaning, a quiet whisper from the stars guiding their journey. With such a profound connection to the sun, the stars, and the flow of water, it's no surprise that the individuals tasked with timekeeping in ancient Persia held a rather elevated status. These weren't just folks who happened to own a fancy stick that cast a shadow. They were often priests, scholars, or highly trusted advisors to the ruling elite. Imagine the weight of that responsibility. You're not just telling someone it's time for dinner. You're helping the emperor decide when to launch a war, when to begin a crucial trade negotiation, or even when to inaugurate a new building. Your precision, your accuracy, could literally alter the course of history. No pressure, right? It's a bit like being the person in charge of Google Calendar for an entire empire, but if a typo could lead to a cosmic catastrophe. These royal timekeepers, whether they were the aforementioned magi or court astronomers, would have access to the most sophisticated instruments of their day. While we've talked about simple sundials and water clocks, the ones used at the heart of the Persian Empire, particularly in grand cities like Persepolis, would have been marvels of ancient engineering. Picture large, intricately carved stone sundials, perhaps adorned with zodiac symbols or depictions of the gods, designed not just for utility, but as symbols of imperial power and wisdom. These weren't just for telling time. They were statements. Look how precisely we can measure the very fabric of existence. They seemed to declare. And the water clocks, too, would have been highly refined. We're talking about more than just a leaky pot. Some might have featured complex internal mechanisms, perhaps even incorporating early gear systems to ensure a constant flow or to animate small figures that would mark the passage of hours. Imagine a tiny mechanical Persian king raising a scepter every time an hour passed, or a little bird drinking from a cup. Much more engaging than a digital readout, don't you think? The very architecture of Persian palaces and temples often incorporated elements of timekeeping and astronomical observation. Courtyards would be strategically aligned to capture shadows at significant times of the day or year, turning entire buildings into giant, functional sundials. Windows and doorways might be positioned to frame specific constellations or the rising sun on a solstice. It really gives new meaning to the idea of a smart home, doesn't it? Your house itself was a time-telling device integrated seamlessly into the cosmic order. It hints at a deep respect, even reverence, for the natural cycles of the universe. One quirky tidbit, and something that might truly make you appreciate your digital alarm, is the effort involved in maintaining these instruments. Sundials had to be precisely aligned and calibrated for different latitudes and seasons, and water clocks required a constant supply of clean water and regular cleaning to prevent blockages or inconsistencies in flow. It wasn't a set it and forget it kind of deal. Someone had to be constantly vigilant, ensuring the empire's time was accurate. Historians still argue about the extent to which these complex instruments were truly standardized across the vast Persian Empire, or if regional variations in design and accuracy were common. It was probably a bit of both, leading to some amusing cross-province confusion, I imagine. My sundial says it's time for the imperial tax collection, but your water clock says we still have an hour. Oh dear, perhaps we should just go with whenever the sun feels like it today. So, we've drifted through the sun-drenched days and starlit nights of ancient Persia, observing how they meticulously measured the passage of time with the elegant dance of shadows and the steady drip of water. But the story of Persian timekeeping doesn't end with the fall of the Achaemenid Empire or the conquests of Alexander the Great. Oh no. The innovations and insights of these ancient observers laid foundations that echoed through centuries, gently shaping how civilizations that followed perceived and measured the very fabric of existence. Their legacy, like a quiet river, flowed into the streams of Greek science, Roman engineering, Islamic scholarship, and eventually, the very clocks ticking on our walls today. Think about the principles. The idea of dividing a day into smaller, measurable units, whether they were hours of varying lengths or eventually standardized segments, was a profound conceptual leap. Before such systems, time was largely amorphous, defined by natural events: sunrise, midday, sunset, the moon's cycle. The Persians, among others, helped to solidify the abstract concept of time as something quantifiable, something that could be tracked and predicted. This might seem obvious to us, but imagine living in a world where time was less a series of numbers and more a feeling, a vague sense of when the cows come home. It really puts into perspective how much we rely on our precise schedules. You probably wouldn't get very far scheduling your doctor's appointment for around the time the sun is high and the birds are chirping loudest, would you? The influence of Persian astronomy, inextricably linked to their timekeeping, also rippled outwards. Their careful charting of celestial movements, driven by both practical and astrological needs, contributed significantly to the broader body of astronomical knowledge in the ancient world. Many of the observational techniques, and even some of the sophisticated instruments, like early astrolabes we briefly touched on, found their way into the hands of later scholars in the Islamic Golden Age. These brilliant minds, building upon the wisdom of their predecessors, would then refine and advance these tools, eventually leading to astonishingly accurate astronomical observations and mechanical clocks that paved the way for our modern devices. So when you glance at your watch, you're in a very, very roundabout way, nodding to the ancient Persian astrologer squinting at a sundial. One delightfully quirky connection is the Persian development of the qanat system for water management. While not directly a timekeeping device, qanats were underground aqueducts that relied on precise gradients to deliver water over long distances. The engineering required to build and maintain these systems would have naturally fostered a deep understanding of water flow and measurement, exactly the kind of knowledge that made advanced water clocks possible. It's a nice thought, isn't it? The same ingenuity that brought life-giving water to arid lands also helped people tell the time. And finally, historians still argue whether the Persian concept of Zirvan, a deified personification of time and destiny, truly reflects a unique philosophical contribution to the understanding of time as an infinite, uncreated force, or if it was more of a theological construct. Either way, it shows how deeply embedded the concept of time was in their cultural and spiritual fabric. As we gently bring our journey to a close, imagine the last rays of the sun fading from a Persian sundial, the long shadow finally disappearing into the twilight. The quiet drip of a water clock continues in the darkness, a steady, rhythmic pulse in the stillness of the night. Time, then as now, marches on, but with a different pace, a different rhythm. A time that invited contemplation, not frantic rushing. A time that was measured by the natural world, urging you to slow down, to observe, to simply be. The ancient Persians, with their elegant sundials and ingenious water clocks, weren't just telling time. They were teaching us to listen to its ancient, soothing song.